when I think about the own role that I had as a parent, as a father specifically, and I look at my parents and I kind of learn from what went on, there's the element of really appreciating them as individuals and some of the choices they probably had to make as being parents. But when I think about my own story, I realize where a lot of things went wrong in my own concept of fatherhood. So my own negative self-talk and self-criticism viewed myself as weak and inferior. And so what I attributed that to is I wasn't raised hard enough. My parents weren't hard, while they might have been hard on me academically, they weren't hard on me with withholding love or withholding acceptance. And so one of the models I took was, I'm going to raise hard sons. I'm going to raise sons that are going to be indestructible because I can't guarantee that I'm going to be here forever. And the world is a hard and cold and ugly place. And I want them to be resilient and strong enough to endure whatever happens. And so the model I had was to be almost like a 1950s dad. So instead of progressing, I regressed my model. And so I really led with a lot of, I don't want to say regimen, but discipline, the idea of raise kids that are polite. Don't let them be children. They need to understand the fact that life is serious and you only get one shot. And if you mess it up, it doesn't matter how early it is you mess it up. It's game over. And so I raised them in a very cold and a very hard way as a dad. And the fact that I worked so much and I was absent and committed to so many other things probably reinforced this distance that existed with my connection with him or lack of a connection with him. And that really manifested after about 10 years of that. It really came to a head where there was a general consensus that nobody liked me. And I will never forget this question. My younger son looked at me one time and he was at the kitchen table doing something, an activity, and there was no catalyst, no provocation for this comment, but he just looked up and very innocently asked, like, am I ever going to have a nice dad? And it was almost as if the dad figure was interchangeable, and he was like, we'd like to recast this role and bring somebody else in that maybe was a little more, compassionate. And that was a very stark reminder to me, or it was a stark realization that, wow, what I was doing was really having a negative effect on not just how they saw me, but the dynamic, between my kids and me. And so it was kind of at that point is where things started to unravel for me in my own way that I adopted the idea of fatherhood. And because I entered the concept of parenthood as coming from some place of, I was developed in an inferior way because I wasn't parented the right way, what I realized is how I was parenting my sons, and specifically my older son, who physically resembles me, and he's the oldest the same way I am. I was parenting him the way I wished I would have been parented in my own mind of, oh, if I parent him really hard, it'll make me stronger because that's what I think I probably would have wanted. And so it was this weird dynamic where I realized I was essentially parenting myself as a father, and I wasn't parenting the actual person that was my son. I was parenting kind of what I imagined it to be. It was a really unhealthy dynamic, and it wasn't until that shifted that I was able to actually kind of pause and then reconfigure what my concept of fatherhood was. So when I think about that realization of when I needed to change, unfortunately, because I have a really high degree of willpower, I don't notice a lot of obstacles early on. I tend to just roll over them. And so where all these symptoms and red flags were popping, it just allowed me to bore sight on where I was going even more. So I didn't realize the path I had chosen as a parent was incorrect until it was already too late, until everything had kind of unraveled in a very negative way. So there was already kind of little t trauma was embedded. There was already family dysfunction. It was in the process of essentially not just dissolving a marriage, but dissolving an entire family unit where it was, hey, these 4 people that have lived in the same house, it might as well have been an episode of it might as well have been that MTV special, like where they put like Real World, where they put all the strangers together. It was like, okay, season over, everybody go back to where you were. And it was very much every person for themselves at that point when I realized, oh, that's been the problem. I've contributed to this. And it was all within my ability to stop it. I just either ignored it or chose not to stop it because my conviction was so high that this is the right way to do it. So it was a little too late when I realized it. And then it had to go through the process of not just letting that kind of damage kind of run its course, kind of like tremors from an earthquake. Like once the plates slip past each other, you can't really stop the effects of what happened. You can only deal with the damage once it's done. Once I was in damage control, that was a lot different. Then I could reapproach fatherhood with a completely different mentality. And it wasn't immediate. It took a while. But so identifying that kind of path to as a parent was a much harder process. And it wasn't as quick as doing it as kind of an individual level.